Hello, I'm John and welcome to today's product spotlight. So my friend James called me again recently and said, hey, I have this cool model I want you to do a spotlight on. And he told me what it was and I thought, oh yeah, that would make a cool spotlight. So that's what we're looking at today. Let's go to the workbench. All right, so here's what we're looking at today. And you can see I'm doing this a little bit differently because, well, this packaging is really impressive. And let me just tell you what we're looking at. It's a HO scale GTEL 8500 horsepower 3-unit big blow turbine from ScaleTrains. This one represents number 6. And if you go to ScaleTrains website, you'll find they have a few different, or I should say several different numbers available. These are referred to as DCC and sound equipped for $999.99. Now, that's just what their list price is listed on the website. If you shop around, or even if you shop around on ScaleTrains website, you might be able to find it for less. So, for example, this one that we're looking at is listed as $799.99 as some kind of a discount. I don't see any reason why it's discounted, but that's what it has on the website. So just look around and know that the MSRP is for $1,000. Now, let me show you why I did it this way, because this is pretty cool. The presentation on these things is just ridiculously cool. So you open it up and it has this foam, and then it has the manual here as well. And the manual has all the information that you would want, okay? Pictures, handling, lubrication, warranty information, history about the real one, all the different things you need for DCC. It's very comprehensive, and exploded view drawing just for each of the 3 pieces. And when I say each of the 3 pieces, this is what I'm talking about. This model consists of the A unit, which is what we would refer to as the locomotive, or the B unit, and then there's a tender down here. And then if you look, there's some additional stuff in here which we'll take a look at. So let me get these unpackaged and you can see what we're dealing with today. I showed that little cutout on the inside of the box, and this is what's in there. You have a little collector's pin. This is a bunch of spare parts because these parts do tend to fall off, and I'll talk about that in a little while. And then it comes with this little magnifying glass, and the magnifying glass actually has a light on it that you can turn on. And I guess this is to demonstrate, see, little LED. This is so that you can look at all the amazing detail on the model, I'm sure. The most utilitarian thing I think that it came with are these spare parts. So here's what the model, or models, depending how you look at this, looks like on the track. We have our A unit, which I mentioned before, and what I'll do is I'll just go through these one at a time, but for now I just wanted to show it set up with all 3 pieces. The A unit in the front, the B unit here, and then the tender back here. And what we're going to do is go through each part sort of close up so that you can see what's on each unit. And I think you'll find as we're looking at this that the detail is really impressive. So let's go to the A unit first. So something I want to mention is on the ScaleTrains website, it says that these models will negotiate as tight as an 18-inch radius curve, and that's without all the detail stuff attached, meaning the hoses, and there are some chains on the tender that I'll show you that they come detached, and that's so that if you want to run this on a really small radius curve, you can. However, if you attach all the detail parts like the hoses and those chains I just mentioned, then the minimum recommended radius is now 22 inches. And really, to be honest, with a model like this, you probably just want to put it on a layout with as wide of a curve as possible, because it will look a lot better, say on a 30 or 32 inch radius curve. or something big like that. I've scrutinized the paint and markings on this model, and it's nothing short really of perfection. All the separately applied details, like these thin wire grabs over here, are done in a way that really is to scale. And boy, let me tell you, I mean, the latches on the doors also look like separately applied parts. I can't really tell if they are. I don't think they are, but they look really, really good. And then all of this stirrup detail is all very finely rendered. There's some minor fuzziness in the paint over here along the red and gray. But other than that, like I was saying, the separation lines are perfect. You can see that this is an actual, I guess, what's the word for it? Hollowed out area here. You can actually see through this into the inside of the model, which is very cool. So that grate is done really well also. And then if you look, you can see that there's a lot of sort of undersill detail that kind of pops out just at how good it looks. Looking at the trucks, you can see there's a lot of extra little detail that's picked out on the trucks. It has sanding lines. I mean, there's really sanding line back here. I mean, there's really not much that they could have added to this model that would have made it better. Everything that you would want, I think, is there. And then something that's kind of curious to me, but interesting nonetheless, is that the door will actually open if you push on it. It's spring-loaded. I'm not really sure why they did that, other than the fact that it's cool. So, but I can't imagine why someone would want that door to be open or why it's such a stiff spring. But anyway, I just did want to show that to you. And something else that I was just noticing as I was showing you the door is how good the grates on this piece also look. It's just really cool. Something else I've noticed is the grab irons here look a little, I don't know if they're installed crooked or if it's following the contour of this piece here, but they look a little funky right in here. Like they're not perfectly straight. And also this rear view mirror looks like it's a little cockeyed. And now it may be like that on the prototype. I doubt it because they need to see something that's vertically straight up and down. So I'm not sure why. Because, you know, if you were in the engineer seat looking into that mirror, you'd be seeing up here. And that's not really what they need to see when they're looking in their rear view mirror. So I wanted to do a close-up like this because I wanted to show off the really delicate nature of some of these details. Like this really fine separately applied grab over the windshield. The windshield wipers themselves are very thin and narrow. You can see from this angle, there's really a lot going on here. And then just everything on the front of the model. It has all these fine details and a lot of separately applied stuff like the grabs. It looks really good. So taking a look from this angle, you can see that this is actually a dual headlight in here, and we'll look at the lights later. But there's also an air hose down here. And I'm also noticing that this grab on the front looks a little crooked also. So it seems like they could maybe do a better job with the grabs, because they're not all as straight as I'd like to see, especially on a $800 model. But the level of detail is really impressive. Something else that's kind of hard to see, and I don't know if I'll be able to show this to you, but it has a fully finished cab interior, which is also a really cool touch, because you can see it if you look through the windshield. All right, we'll have a look at the fireman's side here. And once again, you can see the door pushes open. Pretty cool. Same thing on this side. There's a lot of extra detail in the trucks and also the undersill. You have your sanding lines. You have your air tank details. And in case it wasn't obvious before, you can see this is a see-through grate on both sides. So here's the back of the model. You can see it's also very finely detailed with all kinds of stuff going on back here. And I mentioned before that James lost some parts, and it were these little detail parts. He said they kind of fell off, and he was not being careless with it, but they just came off when he was carrying this around at the club, Silicon Valley Lines. And what's cool about these is you can attach them to the B unit. And I'm not going to do that because I'm not messing with this model in a way that makes anything fall off. I'm being really careful with it since I'm borrowing it. But I just want to mention that you can attach those. And that's what they were talking about when they were giving the 2 different minimum recommended radius for the curves. If this stuff is all attached, you don't want to run it on a super narrow or tight curve because it'll have the likelihood of causing problems. This is the last 3/4 view we'll look at on this unit before we take a look at the top. Just wanted to mention that these actually are really well done. Separately applied wire grabs. They look straight, and the distance between the surface of the locomotive and the grab itself looks very uniform. So that part looks really good. So a lot of times on models like this, there's not really much to see on the roof. Clearly, with this model, that's not the case. There's a lot to look at here. And I'm talking about all this separately applied stuff. This is all separately applied appliances up here. So one thing that jumps out at me right away is that this is a photo etched grate on top of something that was applied separately there and looks pretty amazing. The horn casting also looks great. And if you look, all of this stuff is separately applied. They have these little grates underneath. Even this exhaust is separately applied. So since I already have this camera arranged for looking at the top-down view, I figured we'll do the switcheroo to the B unit. And again, I mean, there's so much to look at here. This is photo etched walkway, separately applied. These are photo etched grills, separately applied. There's a grab here, little grab here. I mean, there's everywhere you look, there's something. Even the lift rings, which may be hard to see here, are separately applied little lift rings. And also I'm looking at the grills right along here on the side of this separately applied detail part. And the walkways here, it's just, wow. Definitely a lot of very good separately applied detail all over this model. And wait till you see the tender. It has a separately applied photo etched grill walkway to die for. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's go around this B unit real quick. Once again, having examined the paint and the markings with my magnifying visor, I found it all to be just exceptional. The logo is clean with no fuzziness to any part of it. Looks outstanding. As you can also see, all the grabs are separately applied fine wire grabs. And there are a lot of them on this model. I mean, if you counted these, I'm guessing there's probably at least 20 or 30 on each side. You know, the latches for the doors also look to be separately applied parts. Just, wow. All right, so looking at the front of the B unit, these are the receptacles where those little hoses hook up, right? You plug those into this. My strong recommendation would be to just set this thing up on your layout and just leave it. Connect all that stuff and then just leave it. Because if you start messing around, taking those hoses on and off all the time, you're going to lose stuff. And as cool as it would be to run on a big club layout or something like that, I'd just be really paranoid about losing the parts. I mean, you can get more, but that's, I don't know, for me, that's kind of not the point. Because getting more just means you have to wait for them. And of course, I want to show it from this angle as well so that you can see the air hoses down here and all these finely rendered little grabs, uncoupling lever. Just detail on this thing is just off the charts. I didn't mention this on the other side because I wanted to have something to talk about when we looked at the fireman side of this model, and that is that the doors open, which is pretty cool. These are just sliding doors. You can leave them open or closed. And boy, you know, that's something that they didn't have to do that, but it sure is cool. Sure, when they ran these around on the rails, it would have been closed at all times, but that's something, maybe you have it, you know, on a repair track or at the shop, and you'd have those doors open on the layout, right? To show that they're working on it. It's pretty cool. So, of course, we also have to look at the back of this model. And again, there's quite a lot to look at. Everything from these little receptacles here to the hose detail. And there's a little service light. You'll also notice this is a separately applied ladder. Some hoses over here, or a hose over here. This is uncoupling lever. It's a wire uncoupling lever. This is pretty cool stuff. And something that's kind of hard to see, but I'm going to try to show you anyway, is if you look, you can see that the turbine is visible inside there. That's pretty cool. It actually spins when you activate it with DCC. That's also pretty cool. So let's take a look at the tender now. I mentioned earlier about some chains that need to be disconnected if you're going to run this on a layout that has very tight radius curves. These are the chains we're talking about. You can see here it's loose. It looks like this one is also loose. This one, James connected, and you can see where it attaches. So, and then there's one up here. So the point to all this is, if you have a layout that has the minimum recommended of 22 inches, you can connect these chains. If you have one that's 18, then you better not connect those chains because it won't run right. Something else to look at while we have this on the table here is all the detail in the trucks themselves. That's pretty cool stuff. And everything that you see that's a detail part is separately applied. And something else that's cool, there's a little rail, like a handrail, that runs all the way along the bottom of this thing. That looks like a separately applied part as well. So there's no shortage of separately applied fine details in these models. A look at the front of the tender reveals all kinds of just astounding detail. I mean, there's detail in front of detail and detail behind the detail. Separately applied wire grabs, ladders, the brake wheels separately applied. There's just, you know, receptacles over here for hoses. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. Now looking from this side, this is what I was talking about. Look, these little hoses come down behind the separately applied ladder. Do you see that back in here? That's pretty cool. And then there's something else down back in here. That's a separately applied part that's behind other detail. Pretty amazing. And then looking at this side of the tender, you can see that James didn't attach all the chains on this side. They're still detached. But, you know, looking at this, and I'm astounded by how good all this stuff in here looks. That's pretty cool stuff, man. Just got to take your hat off to ScaleTrains for the level of detail on this model. Crazy. And here's a look at the rear of the tender. You can see that it has an LED reverse light. And just like the front, there's sort of, you know, this detail right behind separately applied detail in front. This little spigot out here, that looks pretty darn cool. And the separately applied fine wire cut lever also looks great on this end. I kind of bragged on ScaleTrains a few minutes ago about the separately applied photo etched walkway up here. Isn't that incredible? I've never seen that much photo etched anything on a model. The whole top of this thing is a photo etched piece. That looks really cool. The hatch detail also looks great. And I don't know how well this shows up on the camera, but these look to be separately applied stairs as well, photo etched stairs on all four corners of this model. So that's pretty cool. Normally, I'll put this on my test track and I'll start it up so that we have, the sound of it, and then I'll make it go forward, and then I'll make it go in reverse, and then I'll make it going forward again. So it has something called Hostler mode, which is supposed to simulate just the A unit being able to push this stuff around the yard in order to get to its train. So we're going to start up the A unit with F8. And before we do anything else, I want to point out that the cab light came on and the number boards are also on. And I want to mention that because later on when we look at the lights, you're not going to see the number boards. But the trick to having them come on is by starting the sound, doing the startup sequence. Once the locomotive's sound is on, then the number boards remain on. So why don't we go ahead and we'll go forward now. All right, we cleared the switch. Okay, so now that we've connected to the train, James is going to hit F3, which will actually start up the B unit. And the B unit is the one that has the turbine sounds in it. And by the way, this is something that you can adjust down volume-wise if you need to. I know that there have been a lot of people at clubs annoying other members with these models. So it's just something to think about if you have one of these. Be considerate of your other operators. All right, so taking a look at the lights here, the headlight is F0 as always, comes on in the direction of travel. F5 will turn on your little service light there on the truck. That looks really cool. And then this model has classification lights that you can cycle by hitting F6. The first option is this white. If you push F6 again, it cycles to red. And finally, hitting F6 again, it cycles to green. And then off. F7 dims the headlight for oncoming traffic. So I wanted to mention also that F5 that turned on that courtesy light under the cab also turns on this light in the back. The courtesy light that comes out from under the cab only shows up on the engineer's side, and F5 refers to what they call as nighttime mode. We're looking at the B unit now, and I wanted to mention this because F10 will turn on the rear headlight on the B unit. And now we're looking at the tender, and the tender light is the same as the locomotive light on F0, and it's directional. So when I reverse direction, that comes on, and it's very bright. This is a super solid release from ScaleTrains, and you have to take your hat off, I think, to ScaleTrains for mass producing something that's this super detailed. I remember when these first came out a few years ago, because they're on their probably second or third run of this model now. But when it came out the first time, I think a lot of us couldn't believe how good it was. So my hat goes off to ScaleTrains for making such a super detailed model in the first place and continuing really to push everybody to upping their games when it comes to detail on models. So thanks to ScaleTrains. And I also want to make a special note of thanks to my friend James for letting me borrow this model, and also for meeting me down at Silicon Valley Lines. That's where we took the shots of the train running. I actually asked James to operate the train so that I could narrate it while we were doing the demonstration. And we had a lot of fun. It's always good to see him. And thanks, James, for that. And thanks to Silicon Valley Lines as well. And thanks to you, the viewers, for watching. I'll see you next time.